And welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are doing another review. And this time we are going to be taking a look at season one of Fallout, the Amazon series based on the game franchise of the same name. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and let us know down in the comments below what you think. Do you agree with our assessment, or do you think we're just talking out of our asses? And if there are any shows or movies you'd like us to take a look at, please remember to let us know down in the comments below. We're always checking. But Lee, how are you doing on this fine Saturday afternoon? Any allergies plaguing you at all?
No, luckily not. And I guess hopefully I don't jinx myself by saying that because I've definitely been out and about in nature quite a bit. But luckily have not encountered any issues with any allergies. So maybe this is
Yeah.
my year where I don't get bit by the allergy bug.
Lucky bastard, because I've been laid low for 2 days. I mean, it just happened all of a sudden. Because as soon as the temperatures plunged, it was like, hello allergies. And well, let's just say if you were casting for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I would be a top candidate. I mean,
Yeah, well, hopefully you feel better there because I
yeah,
know those allergies can absolutely kick some people's asses for sure. And there's
yep,
been years where like I'll feel like I'm stuffy for like a week or more before it finally clears up.
yep. And I've got a lot of tea with me, a lot of oranges, so I'm gonna be loading up on vitamin C. Fallout came out this year, and we actually did a trailer reaction a few months ago. So I'll be sure to check that out. I'll even link it in the description below. But at that time, we did have some high hopes for the series, and having watched it, and I think in my case, I've watched it twice now. I mean,
So bye.
I mean, there. So far, it hasn't really disappointed at all, has it?
No, no,
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I think it's been, I think we've been struggling with that kind of video game curse, right? I think we've seen that quite frequently where we're just kind of in that struggle of video game adaptations just not really being worthwhile. But I think we've seen that curse being lifted. And I believe that this is once again another good example of, I would say, a gaming franchise like Fallout. And I will say I have very little working knowledge of the Fallout games.
Hmm.
And for you, I think I'm going to echo the same thing. I don't believe that you're super knowledgeable about it either, right?
Yeah, it's very minimal. So,
Yes, yes.
but
So
what I will say is the fact that I think what they did great here was the fact that they didn't try to adapt it to a certain game in the franchise. They took the general concept and kind of crafted their own world. Being faithful to what the franchise is, but also being true and doing their own thing.
yeah,
Um,
I was very happy with that. I think that was a very smart thing because, I think from the outside looking in, you always kind of run into that where, people that are fans of the series are going to probably gravitate a lot more towards it.
mhm.
I.e., something like Halo, which is, I think, the total opposite of this, that is absolutely abysmal. So I think just be able to, kind of create something allow it to be unique in its own thing without like being kind of overburdened with too much of the universe. And I think it kind of strikes a nice balance with that.
But I think an exception to that rule would be The Last of Us, because The Last of Us kind of follows the game, pretty faithfully, but it does, but it's still able to do its own
Oh,
thing.
for sure. Yes. Yeah. And
But
there's
but
absolutely
that's an
no,
exception though, not the norm.
yeah. And totally. And that's totally fine if like future showrunners want to do stuff like that. But I think just because Fallout, there is kind of like an overarching narrative, which we'll get into. But I think a lot more of it is enjoying the world, enjoying kind of that kind of interesting humor, kind of the crazy gore stuff that we see. So I think a lot of it is just being able to kind of experience what it's like to live in the Fallout universe, and I think they capture that really well.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead and take us into this 8 episode first season.
Yeah, so and I have to admit, like it absolutely started off extremely well, right? So
Hmm.
we kind of get the opening part where we see Cooper, who's played by Walton Goggins. So we see Cooper, he's kind of this character, which we'll kind of get more into as we move on. Because he has a very integral role to the story. and kind of helping provide us with a little bit of clarity about kind of the origins of everything that happens. But in essence, we get to meet Cooper, and he's with his kid, and it opens up right away with the nukes going off. And I thought that was a hell of a way to start off. I was totally drawn back by that. I knew it was going to be happening eventually, but I was very surprised that they just outright show you everything that happened. So I was curious from your standpoint, do you think it was smart to start off like that, or do you wish they kind of let it be a little bit more of a surprise later on?
I kind of thought about it for a bit, but I really applaud them for having done that, because it kind of just gets everything out of the way. It just says, hey,
Yeah.
look, this is how the universe starts. This is where it all began. And yeah, I mean, because really, do we really need to know like what led up to to the bombs being dropped? Because we sort of get a hint about that in later episodes, but just seeing it happen, it's a very dramatic and jarring start. But I think it was a good way to kick things off.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I actually definitely side with the idea of them starting off with that. But yeah, literally the first start of this is we watch a whole bunch of nukes going off. And then we fast forward 219 years. And this is where I guess we kind of get our ultimate start to this series. And we get to meet Lucy, right? So Lucy ends up being one of our three main characters, right? So I would consider her to be I guess the most main, right? I think she gets the most screen time. And we get to meet Lucy, who lives in Vault 33. And we find out that within our vault, right, these are just kind of pretty much like fallout shelters, right? In essence, it was how people were, in case the world was going to end, this is where people were going for. Were these vaults, and we see that she's in Vault 33, and we see that these vaults, or at least in where we're at with Lucy's vaults, we see that Vault 33 is actually connected with two other vaults. I believe it was Vault 31, 32, and 33 are all connected together in this circumstance. So, and I guess this is a good time to bring up, like, they did a fantastic job with these sets. I thought it was so cool to be able to kind of see everything. Everything felt very real. Like, it didn't feel like it was overly relied on CGI. And I think they just did a fantastic job of really just kind of taking you and bringing you into the world of the vaults. How did you how was your experience when you got to see the vault for the first time?
I mean, I will give props to Jonathan Nolan, because the Nolan brothers are big on using practical effects as opposed to CGI. So just seeing the vaults as they are, it on the one end it shows just how eager they are to be faithful to the game, but at the same time they also want you to see that this is actually a real lived-in world. You definitely get that retro futuristic vibe from from the vault, and obviously that's the entire aesthetic of the show and the games, is that retrofuturism. So so you're just taking bits and pieces from different time periods and just putting together to create this sort of the sort of optimistic utopia where everything's fine. And in a way you could sort of see the vault as like a character in itself, because it's giving you off this impression that yes, the bombs have fallen, civilization's destroyed, but life goes on. So you really don't have any idea that anything could be amiss in the world until later on.
Yes.
But I won't go into too much detail. I'll let you do that.
Yes, because we definitely get it, and that's such a great point, because it's just so it's very like jarring, right? Because obviously we know the world we exist in right now, and like when we experience Vault 33, it feels like almost it's like comically how over the top nice everything is.
Yeah,
it's
like overly quaint, basically.
Yes, yes. Like it's just such an interesting thing, and I think that kind of brings up such a great point. Is just like how, as we meet these characters, all these characters are really created by the environments that they're in, and like just because we got one that is with the Brotherhood of Steel. We have Lucy that's going to be with the Vaults, and we have the Ghoul, who is kind of existed out in the overworld during everything that happened. So
The
you see
wasteland,
how
basically.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the Wasteland. Thank you. But pretty much like you have all these characters, and they're all very much defined by the environment they lived in. And Vault 33, absolutely, I think is kind of this very it kind of creates this whole environment. Like we know that, like for instance, like they practice fighting, right? They have a shooting range. They have like all these things that you wouldn't really expect from people that are just kind of existing in this small bubble. Like, what is the purpose for you to really be able to fight and do stuff? It's not very critical for you. But obviously, in the grand scheme of things, they want to be able to go to the surface, to the wasteland, to kind of reestablish society. And in order to do that, they have to be very capable people. The other thing wow, is this sex is very it's like almost used very nonchalantly in this universe, right? I think especially for us Americans, right? I think we kind of we tend to shy away from all the sex stuff. I think people generally are a little bit uncomfortable with that, especially for us Americans compared to other parts of the world. But in this, it's like they're just out there, like they talk about sperm counts, they talk about doing cousin stuff, and really they're all about breeding pretty much, right? And that's kind of where we start off with Lucy. She's looking to find a husband, and because everyone in the vault is related, right? They kind of do this swap with the other vault in order to do something. So this is where we kind of get the whole thing started. But how did you like kind of the introduction to Lucy and just be able to see how people in Vault 33 are?
I mean, in some ways, you kind of get this vibe that everybody in the vault is naive, right? It's like
absolutely.
I mean, and which is not surprising because when you live a sheltered life, I mean, obviously there are going to be things about life that you're not going to be too, what's the right word, expertly on. And it definitely shows when she actually starts interacting with people on the surface because most of her understanding of the world is coming from books or tapes or stuff like that. So you can't really fault her for that. But at the same time, there's this sort of quaintness to it because it's like she's so sweet, she's so innocent. You really don't want anything bad to happen to her, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
but obviously, so when she goes, so when she suffers her first calamity, it's like you sort of cringe a little bit because you're like, no, like she's such a sweet little girl, like this can't happen to her. And then like as she as she develops throughout the series, it's like more and more bad things happen to her, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's kind of like, well, you kind of have to learn at some point to walk on your own,
yes.
because even in that vault environment, it's like. She's basically just relying on other sheltered people to tell her, yeah, everything's fine, everything's good, we're one big happy family. when to be fair, that's all she ever knew. Now another thing that I will add is I feel like out of all of the Vault Dwellers, I think Lucy is probably the most curious out of all of them, right?
Absolutely.
And Moldaver even hints at this later on. I mean, obviously, she seems to be the only person who's actually more than willing to engage with the outside world, whereas everybody else in the vault is very, very much interested in just staying in their lane. I mean, and her brother to an extent does share some of that curiosity, but it's like, it's more out of. I wouldn't say it's more out of necessity, but it's something that kind of just pushes him to kind of like learn about more about what's going on. And obviously we'll get to that later on in the episode.
Yeah,
but
I would say like for the brother, right, just to your point, right, I think a lot of his problem is he's just very fearful of it. Like he's someone that I think is very curious about what's out there, but even to his own admission, like he's just kind of, I don't want to say coward, but he very much is okay with being a part of the status quo,
right,
to a certain extent. So
But there's certain circumstances that kind of lead him to kind of like push back the curtain and see what's behind all of that.
Yes, and he kind of does it in his own way with the vault, right? Within kind of his own safety net,
exactly,
so to speak. So, but yeah, like I think this is where kind of everything starts to get triggered. Is Lucy looking for a husband that's not her cousin, which comes up quite frequently in this. And she's they're kind of doing this trade where we find out Vault 32 had this kind of issue with the crops. Some type of blight happens. So there's kind of this trade where Vault 33 is helping, provide, some food and, seed and stuff like that to Vault 32. And Vault 32 is passing on, I guess, a male to impregnate her because pregnancy is really critical in this society. Which kind of makes sense. And it's like, when you think about it, it's like, the only way that this vault is going to survive for 220 plus years, right, is you need to have children. So it's just one of those things where when you think about it, it makes sense from that standpoint that, having kids and kind of furthering that offspring is going to be a necessity in order for them to exist come the future.
I mean, it's pragmatism, basically. So
yes, very good. Yes, absolutely. So, but we find out that the people in Vault 32 aren't exactly what they seem. And this is where we meet, I guess, really our overarching antagonist, right? Who comes across as the leader of Vault 32, the overseer. And that's going to be Lee Moldaver, who ends up we find out that she's kind of brought all these raiders, and now they're interested in taking over Vault 33. And we find out a lot of that is because Moldaver wants to kidnap Lucy's father. And I forget who's the actor that plays Lucy's father. Can you help me with that? I always forget.
Yeah, it's Kyle MacLachlan, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, because the same guy who played Paul Atreides.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because I was thinking about Dune with all the Dune stuff going on. So, but yes. So thank you. So yeah, ultimately, Lee's there or Moldaver's there in order to get him. And I have to admit, like the whole like fight sequence where we kind of see this battle between the Raiders of Vault 32 and then the people that we kind of know in Vault 33. Talk about total over the top gore. Right? It was totally, for me, I didn't know what to expect with it, but I just loved how totally silly and drawn out everything was. I just really enjoyed it. It was just so, I hate to say funny because we're watching people be terribly maimed, but it just was a really fun style that I thoroughly enjoyed. So what did you think of kind of the just kind of be able to see this big over the top fight sequence in the first episode?
I mean, it's very faithful to the video game. So I'll give them that because I watched it and I was like, you know what? Good on them. I mean, they're doing their own thing, but they're staying true to the ethos of Fallout.
Yes.
which means exaggerated weapons and over the top killing.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it was just a total blast. I really like to see it. And I think we do build up here and we get to see, right, is Lucy's proficiency in being able to kind of deal with her own situations, right? Like she's a physically capable fighter. And I'm glad that they introduced us to that now, because we kind of get some like hints that they, study fighting, they study, marksmanship and stuff like that. So we get to kind of see that in action. And I think that was a very good thing for us to be able to see as an audience, because obviously moving forward here, right? So Moldaver ends up capturing her dad, Moldaver takes the dad up to the surface and kind of goes off to do her own thing, and Lucy ends up deciding like, hey, I'm going to go after her, even to the chagrin of the rest of the Vault people and the kind of the leadership cast that's there, right? Who are very much like, hey, you know what? We're sorry that he got captured, but that's not our problem. We need to stay here. And this is where we get to see our first character, right? She goes up to the surface and she's introduced to the wasteland for the first time. And this is where we get our first glimpse of the surface world after all the events that happened. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really our star and Lucy and how she begins. And I'll just go ahead and say I always liked her okie dokies. And I think kind of goes to what we're talking about earlier, where she definitely has this very kind of altruistic, very happy demeanor about her. And she very much clashes as we move forward, but we'll talk about that in the future.
I mean, she's
Uh,
very happy-go-lucky.
Yes, absolutely. That is the best way to describe her. So yeah, and that's where we kind of get our start. Is we got Lucy going to the surface, and she's going after Moldaver for her father. And we also meet another character, right? And this is going to be, and I'm going to go ahead and open up with this now because I'm sure it's going to come up throughout. We open up with Max, who's a part of the Brotherhood of Steel. And I think that for me, without giving too much away, I think Max was, and I would say by far the weakest part of the Fallout series for me.
Mhm.
Um, so let me go ahead and open up to you, right? What did you think about Max as we kind of get introduced to him here?
I mean, I think he's the most underdeveloped character because with Lucy, you get to see her grow as she travels the wasteland, and even with Howard, Cooper slash the Ghoul, you can sort of see the journey of how he went from being this famous Hollywood actor to becoming the cynical devilish creature. With Max, I feel like you really don't know much about him, and they don't really go into too much detail as to how he came to be who he is, right? I mean,
Definitely
all
not.
I mean, all you get is just this guy who, I mean, for lack of a better word, has been brainwashed by the system in which he finds himself in the Brotherhood of Steel. Because let's make no bones about it. As much as I love the Brotherhood of Steel, there is very much a cult mentality about it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So with Max, you kind of get the feeling that that everything is the same, nothing ever changes, and it reflects, and maybe that was the intention. Maybe they wanted Max to physically embody the ideology of the Brotherhood of Steel, but you don't really see much of a change or development in him, right? I mean, apart from the fact that he apparently he just gets lucky, first where his friend Dane suffers that horrible misfortune and he gets, you know, I guess promoted to squire, and then again when he takes the armor for himself. But other than that, you really don't see him, do that much. He really doesn't add much to the storyline. In other
No,
words,
I definitely, yeah, I totally agree with you that I felt like he didn't bring a whole lot to the table. I will say for the Brotherhood of Steel, I think they needed to take some sex ed classes because they are absolutely the way that they describe I guess sex or their experience with sex is very concerning.
Mhm.
But yeah, Brotherhood of Steel definitely needs to do some sex ed classes because those people are totally screwed up with the idea of sex and I guess how they're supposed to be functioning. And
Well, let me ask
we
you
do.
this. Well, let me ask you
Mhm.
this. Did you get Mandalorian vibes from them? Because the entire time I was watching those scenes, I kept thinking they really remind me of that enclave of Mandalorians who never take off their helmets and they're like, "This is the way. This is the
That's
way."
that's actually that's the great point. I didn't really think about that, but you're right. Like there is a really strong focus put on kind of their armor, right? And we see for the most part that they're very much like, even when we get first introduced to the various like knights, right? We get to meet Max is a squire for a knight Titus.
Mhm.
And we never actually see him up until later on, right? But the whole time, there's definitely this shroud, and it's very interesting that the kind of like the mask, it kind of like it kind of changes their voice too, right? So it's very interesting. Like it feels very impersonal how these characters are kind of interacting with each other, because we, for the most part, barely see them outside their suits, because they pretty much live in it for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, exactly,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. Not to mention the fact that, at least for Max, right, we get to see a little bit of his origin, which we see replayed plenty of times. So after a while, it was almost like a drinking game for how many times I saw his origin. And I guess, like,
But I mean that look, but that flashback looks so familiar because you remember in the Mandalorian, whenever Mando talks about his past, you see that little kid, like,
yeah, that's true.
he's in like some sort of shelter, and like the
Yep.
Mandalorians fly down, and I'm like,
Yep.
there are just so many parallels right there, man.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And I guess something good to know, right? That I guess he kind of survived one of the nukes in a fridge. So thank you, Indiana Jones. We've all mocked you for many, many years about surviving in a fridge from a nuclear blast, but it kind of feels like kind of the same thing happened there with Max. Now, of course, we don't know if, like, he was how everything kind of transpired, but I did kind of find it funny that we see his first kind of his origin starts with him coming out of a fridge.
Yeah.
It was very interesting, to say the least. So, but yeah, that's our character Max, right? We get to meet him in the first episode. And I definitely agree with you. Like, those suits look awesome, and I think the team that put that together did a fantastic job of putting together, like, legitimate suits, because I do believe that they are, like, fully, like, capable. I'm sure that there's plenty of things that they kind of did with them to make them look the way they are, but
Yeah.
absolutely was something that they created that I totally believe are very much real.
So let me ask you this: did you kind of get the feeling that Max was meant to be the comic relief? Because throughout the entire series, obviously Lucy's going through all these horrible trials and tribulations, and obviously Cooper's trying to reconcile himself with his past. You kind of get the feeling that with Max, he's sort of like this bumbling idiot who can't get anything done
He fails
right.
upwards.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly like that one scene in Philly where he gets his foot stuck,
Yes.
in like that wooden walkway, and I'm like, was that meant to be funny? Like, am I supposed to laugh at that? Because it's just so, because just like we said, like, that battle scene at the beginning was a bit over the top with everybody getting killed. I felt like that scene in itself was like over the top humor.
Yeah,
like,
I
it
agree.
was just trying so hard. But
yeah, and I do agree with you. I felt like that's what they were trying to go for. I think the issue that I had, and I think this is one of the reasons where I just find that Max ends up being the weakest part of the show, was if he is supposed to be that type of character, it just doesn't feel like it's pulled off very well.
Yeah.
I think the actor playing him, and like I said, this is not a shot against the actor at all. There's a lot of that could be directing, writing, whatever you want to have. But he just never comes across as having kind of the charm to kind of do that, right? Like, he lacks charisma big time. He absolutely feels like, if you're making a Fallout character, like, he has all of his points in strength and nothing in anything else. He's just kind of this, like, dumb, brutish type of person. We do see, some growth with him throughout that we'll get into, but it felt like that's what they're going for. Like, he was there to kind of maybe break some tension. It just never ends up, I think, working out well in his favor.
Yeah.
And I think, our last character, right, that we've talked about a little bit, and I liked how the first episode, it starts off with, we get to meet Cooper Howard, and then it ends with us meeting Cooper Howard. And obviously there's been a 219-year time skip, right? And we get to see, well, Cooper is still alive, kinda. And we see he's now a character that I think most people know him as the Ghoul, which pretty much is a kind of like, I guess, like, feral person, or let me not use the term feral, right? Because there's definitely some stuff that goes on with that. But in essence, he's kind of like this kind of like person where they have to take this medication, and otherwise they kind of lose their humanity. So we get to kind of see him, and I think very good prosthetic work, right? Like, I really like that. And I think they did a good job with kind of creating this Ghoul. And he's been pretty much alive since the incident. So I think, without getting into too much detail about the Gould, because I don't think we get a whole lot about it, but in essence, like, they have, I don't want to say like, but almost like functional immortality in essence. Or as far as we go, there's people just been surviving for a very long time. So, but yeah, I like how we see Cooper at the very beginning, and then we kind of see what he's become later on, and obviously a lot of his story and his character is understanding kind of the origins of everything that happened. So, but yeah, I absolutely love Walton Goggins, and I think he did such a fantastic job with his role. And I think, like, for me, him and Lucy's interactions are the best part of the show for me.
There's
Where we
there's a bit of like a teacher student relationship going on
absolutely,
between the two,
yes,
because because here you have this like young naive person who pretty much gets all of her learning from books, right?
hmm
So she sort of knows about the world, but she doesn't know the world. And then you've
yes,
got this sort of jaded, cynical figure here who could easily just as well, put two bullets in you as he is to help you out. And in a weird sort of way, he's kind of showing her the ropes of, hey, this is what life is really like here. Um, and you get that scene later on where he's taking her to that super duper mart, and she gets thirsty, and she finally drinks that irradiated water, and he's like, yeah, now you're getting it, you know.
yep, yeah, and I absolutely enjoy that, right? Because I think they very much have a balancing act, right?
Hmm.
Where Lucy needs to be able to kind of get out of that idea of her being, kind of ignorant to the world, right? Like, she's very much gullible for everything, because the only interaction she's ever have is with this, Vault 33 and the people that live there, who all have a very similar outlook to her. But it's kind of like, oh, welcome to the real world, because that's not how everyone is. But in that same token, right, I feel like Walton Goggins, both his character and his persona, he's very much lost his humanity. And I think that Lucy, in a way, kind of subtly helps him kind of regain some of that, like, hey, we need to not have this very nihilistic outlook for everything. So I think that they play very, very well off of each other.
Yeah, I think those two like make a pretty good double act,
Yes,
when you look at that.
absolutely. So, but yeah, that's our kind of like introduction to it, and I would say I absolutely love the first episode. I think it totally got us introduced to the world. We get to see kind of our three main characters, and it definitely got me pumped. So, I mean, as far as first episodes go, how much did this really suck you into the story?
I mean, I'm sort of familiar with the Fallout universe, so so in my case, I was glad to see see them remain faithful to the basic premise of the story, but I also like the fact that they took it in a whole new direction while still being true to the ethos of the franchise itself. Um, Oddly enough, the thing that I really enjoyed about about the series is the fact that they used a lot of music from way back in the day. It kind
Yes,
of gives you like this old timey and antiquated feel. Like, hey, nothing's changed. Life still goes on. Here are these old timey music, but at the same time, I also like the fact that you've got this landscape that's just so nightmarish, right? I mean, and obviously it would be because it's a post-apocalyptic world, but at the same time, it's like, there's so much potential to be had, but everybody's just kind of like doing it in their own way. And I think one of
yes,
the characters even says it too. Like, everybody has an idea of how they want to save the world. They just have different ways of doing it.
yes.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what makes this role so interesting, right? Because you kind of have the vault people that we meet, right? They have their own idea of, like, okay, cool, how are we going to save society, right? We have the Brotherhood of Steel, who we meet through Max, and we get to see about them, and kind of they have ultimately, like, kind of this power, right? Because they have all these like guns and everything like that. So they might be small in number, but they obviously have a very significant impact. I think they even kind of mentioned that they're kind of like, a lot of the stuff is like remnants of like the government before it collapsed.
right.
In essence, is how they have access to all this tech that they utilize. And then we kind of see some other stuff like the Enclave, right? So this is where I think kind of a cool segue, right, is where we meet in the second episode, right? We meet the doctor, Ziggy Wilzig, who's the doctor, who's with the Enclave, which we don't really get a lot about. So I will say that's one of the things that, and maybe we get that in future seasons, but it's one of those things where we don't really get a whole lot about the Enclave. But we find out that, for Max's character and the Brotherhood of Steel, they're trying to get to the doctor, and then the ghoul, he's been kind of, I guess, broken out of his coffin to kind of help out, and his mission is to also get Dr. Welzig. So we kind of see how these characters are kind of how they're going to ultimately converge in this story. We talked a little bit about this, but, from Max and the Brotherhood of Steel, we get to meet his, I guess, his knight, right? So in this hierarchy of things, Max is a squire, and each squire is assigned to a knight, and we get to meet Knight Titus. And Knight Titus is a very interesting character, and you talked a little bit about Knight. I'll let you talk about Knight Titus because I know you really like the Brotherhood of Steel. What did you think about Knight Titus and kind of how we get introduced to some of our bigger characters?
Well, as I mentioned before, I mean, the Brotherhood of Steel does have this Mandalorian Enclave vibe to it, and I will say that the big reveal of when Max takes his helmet off and we see it's none other than Michael Rappaport. I just thought, yep, it's the Bill Burr effect, because he's the last person you would expect to be, in a series like Fallout, right? But here he is as this foul-mouthed guy who's just mouthing off on everybody and is just, basically telling the Brotherhood to go screw itself, because even he doesn't follow its precepts, even though he's a knight. But but on another level, I'm just thinking, you know what? I'm not surprised at all. Like, I mean, they would get someone like Michael Rappaport in there because, again, to go back to my to my example with the Mandalorian, I mean, we didn't expect Bill Burr, a comedian who spent years trashing Star Wars fans, to ever be in the Mandalorian, right? But then when he's in it, like, he just eats up the scene, and he actually does a phenomenal job. So I think in this case, when you see how serious the Brotherhood is, and they're all cult-like and religious and sort of stoic in their demeanor, to have this knight who's just mouthing off and is just saying, yeah, these guys are actually full of shit and they don't really know what they're doing. They're a bunch of crazy kooks, and I don't even know why I'm buying into this. I think it's just brilliant. Because it shows that, because it shows, like, it actually isn't this monolithic structure. There are people in it who apparently aren't buying into it, but they're in it nonetheless because they've got their own ulterior motives,
Yeah, absolutely. It shows just how dysfunctional this group is, right? Because you have to question, like, how is this guy a knight, right? How does he have any, like, standing within this group of people? Because he's such a nasty asshole. And like I said, like, he goes out of his way. Like, he's just like, you know what? We're on this mission. I just want to go kill something. And then you see, like, when he ends up kind of fighting this, like, I guess kind of like this bear, right? It's not like a bear like what we think of a bear.
It's like a mutated bear.
Mutated, yeah.
Yeah.
So we kind of this mutated bear, and it's so funny because he's got this, like, power armor in essence, right? That he's able to utilize, but he is an absolute coward, and like, you see him running away. He gets kind of into this fight with the bear, and he pretty much gets defeated. And I think it just shows how corrupt and how mismanaged the Brotherhood of Steel is at this stage, because, like, we see this knight, and he's just sitting there, and he's just, like, telling Max, like, why are you not getting me, my meds? Like, what are you doing? I'm going to kill you and all this stuff. And you have to be wondering to yourself, like, wow, like, is this how all the knights are, or is this just an offshoot? And it always made me very curious how messed up the Brotherhood is nowadays, because it just seems like they just have the worst people in the worst positions. And I like how, I kind of liked Max's character with this, where he just, like, flat out is just like, you know what? I don't care. You can die. right? And I like that, right? I like characters that are okay with being morally ambiguous, right? Because very much like I think, I would say for most people, right, if you had somebody that was sitting there braiding you, threatening you, and everything like that, you probably wouldn't be signing with them very much. And I like how, we kind of see Max kind of have this realization like, you know what? It's actually probably better off if you die because you're clearly not going to be doing me any benefit in the future. And I like that, right? Because I think we see a lot of superhero stuff nowadays where these characters are kind of like just so like altruistic, right? Like, I can't kill anybody. It goes against everything. But really, we as human beings, right, we're morally gray, and I like being able to see that, especially with Max's character. So, but yeah, he ends up getting his power armor, right? So he ends up, Knight Titus dies. He ends up suiting up with the power armor, and he's off to Philly to find Ziggy Wilzig. And we also have the Ghoul is there in Philly as well, and we also have of course, Lucy, who ends up being there. And this is where we find out that Ziggy Wilzig, the doctor, right? He's trying to get to Moldaver because he has a chip that's implanted in him that he's trying to get to her. And we won't get into, we'll get to that a little bit later, but that's kind of where all of our characters kind of converges in Philly, where they're all ultimately after Dr. Wilzig, and it's in really the grand scheme of things to get to Moldaver, who I think right now we kind of view as the villain of the show, and we find out later on that that's really not the case. But yeah, that's kind of how we get all of our characters kind of in their starting positions, and very much in Fallout fashion, right? Like, Lucy's on ultimately a quest to save her father, but then she pretty much gets sidetracked with a whole bunch of other bullshit. And I think that does very well in the world of Fallout because there's always this overarching story, but you always have about 1,000 side quests that you end up taking on.
Yeah,
To
exactly.
kind of do things. So yeah, that's kind of our introduction to all three of our characters. So what do you think about I guess just being able to see Max, and how do you view kind of the Brotherhood of Steel from kind of our, I guess, initial introduction to them?
I mean, the Brotherhood of Steel. Let's just put it out there. They're visually cool, right?
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
you said it yourself. The armor's cool. The ships are cool. Everything. But but you kind of get this feeling that there's something amiss, right? And obviously, obviously from the very beginning, just the way that the recruits kind of treat each other. I mean, that's kind of a no brainer. You kind of also kind of get this mentality that that the Brotherhood doesn't really care about hazing or anything like that,
Not at
really,
all.
because they're just there to like just treat people like shit. Um, now I will say I will say when Dane gets selected as a squire at the very beginning and everybody's just like cheering, you kind of feel like, oh, okay, so yeah, they may give each other shit, but when someone finally gets the promotion, like all of a sudden they're like, buddy, hey, congratulations, but then when you see what happens to Dane later on, where I think his was there razors in the boots or
There's a
something?
razor blade in their
Yeah,
boots,
yeah,
yeah.
and you come to find out, oh yeah, like yeah, they'll definitely like put on this like face of solidarity, but man, they're a bunch of assholes.
Yes.
Like it's literally, I mean, maybe it literally could be a cutthroat world. So, in anybody who's familiar with the Brotherhood of Steel will know that they're pretty ruthless in the way that they impose order, right? I mean, the way that they do it to to each other is no more different than the way that they would impose order on anybody else who's not within the Brotherhood of Steel. Um, I will say this: a few things that were a bit jarring about that base. Um, that scene where Max visits Dane in the infirmary, and Dane tells him, "Yeah, you get rations here. At least nobody steals them." I'm like, okay, so there's very much the Spartan, military education system where you're encouraged to steal from everybody to survive. So they kind of like hammer home that ideology, do whatever you can to survive, as long as you don't screw the Brotherhood over, right? And then there's that scene where Max is being interrogated by one of the clerics, and kind of, and like at least when I'm watching it, I kind of get the feeling like is he supposed to say something that they want to hear? Because
Mhm.
you kind of get the hint. I don't know about you, but I kind of get the feeling like when they're interrogating him, they're kind of like egging him on, saying, "Hey, this is what we want you to say if you want to get this." And and it kind of get the feeling Max says it, but he's not really sure about it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, I think it shows just how corrupt the idea of like the Brotherhood of Steel is just to its core. It
Mhm.
just has a very backwards mentality that we really can't get our heads wrapped around.
Well, I will say there was one other scene where Max is in the barracks, and he's just sitting there, and as the camera pans, you notice one guy's beating off in the bed,
Yes.
and I'm just
Once
sitting there.
again, sex ed really important for the Brotherhood of Steel.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, really? He's doing this in the daytime with everybody else around? All right. Apparently, this guy is shameless. Like he's just beating one out, and nobody's batting an eyelid. So, I mean, because I don't think that there aren't any women in the organization, correct? It's just
Yeah, no, it is very I do not recall seeing a single female character in that, which is why I think
yeah,
that they purposely do that, right? Is because it's all male for a reason, because I think they're under the idea that, females are just a distraction, and that's why, they act the way that they are because, well, I mean, there ain't no ladies around, so
yeah.
options are kind of limited.
So basically, it's like a cross between a fraternity and a monastery, and if you give them
Yes,
guns,
yes,
basically.
yes. Yep. So, and actually, I think you bring up such a good point with kind of the Brotherhood of Steel, because I think we really see that with Max, and we kind of start to see him maybe kind of breaking out of that idea, because Max is very power hungry, right? Like I like his character because he's like, okay, cool. I let Knight Titus die. Well, guess what? Now I'm gonna be the, I'm gonna have the suit now. So I like that, and we kind of see where, because now he's kind of impersonating Knight Titus, he ends up getting a new squire, which is a character called Thaddeus, who we see in the beginning used to bully him, right? And we see that for Max. He kind of enjoys the power. And I like that because he has no problem like just kind of bullying Thaddeus, like he was bullied by Thaddeus before, like he was bullied by Knight Titus when he became a squire. So I really enjoy the fact that we see a character just kind of have this very human emotion, right? Like he has no problem, like, hey, I've been treated like shit. Maybe it's kind of nice for someone else to get a taste of their own medicine.
Yeah, yeah. He takes off his cod piece and tosses it to him.
Exactly, just like Knight Titus did on the ship. So,
Yep.
just a very cool kind of just to see his character. But we also see him, kind of that's his initial reaction, but you kind of start to see Max mellow out a little bit more. And I think this is where we start to see some of that good character development because, as much as, like I said, I wasn't a huge fan of Max in it, he does absolutely come off as a guy that, kind of starts off as being kind of this dick because that's how he knows that he feels like that's the way he should act, right? Because that's how everyone else acts around him, right? Everyone's a
Mhm.
bunch of dicks. So for him, he has to kind of like realize, like, oh, even though I'm kind of treating Thaddeus like shit, they kind of have that nice moment where we find out that Thaddeus, he used to be the guy that everyone got bullied by, right? So Thaddeus is the one that was always being bullied. And he just was like, oh, Max shows up and now, oh, let's just pick on Max now instead. So we see very much for Max's character, he's like, oh, Thaddeus was really just me, right? Like, he was a guy that was being bullied. He was the one that was kind of the outcast. And Thaddeus did the best he could to kind of turn that around. And unfortunately, Max ended up being his crosshairs. But yeah, I do kind of like kind of some of that bond that we see with Max as he kind of at least breaks a little bit out of that power hungry phase. Um, and I would say while we have that going on with Max, we get our first kind of character to character interaction where we have Lucy and the ghoul. They're kind of meet together because we see Lucy. She needed to, I guess, help Dr. Wilzig to get to Moldaver. And unfortunately, he gets injured along the way. And because of that, she cuts off his head in very kind of very matter of fact type of attitude.
Well, to be fair, he didn't give her much of a choice because he took a cyanide pill. So.
Yes, yeah, it totally makes logical sense in it. It's just very jarring to have this kind of character that we meet and he gets his head cut off, and that's what we have a traveling head, and this is where we get to see a little bit more of Lucy and the ghoul's interaction. Because we have Lucy carrying the head and the ghoul also interested in that, and kind of their clashing personas, because you got Lucy, who is, I think, a very, sweet character, right? Very much gullible to the world. And you have the ghoul, who's absolutely the exact opposite. Like, he's lived in this world on and off for 220 years now, plus however long he was alive prior to kind of the start of the show. So if there's anybody that understands more about it, it's him. And you kind of see how the ghoul is constantly almost like taunting her to be like, hey, you know what? You're going to need to grow up really quickly because you can't have this type of attitude. So how did you like Lucy and the ghoul's kind of like, I would say, very contrasting personalities?
I mean, I mentioned it before. It's this student-teacher dynamic where it's like, where the ghoul's pretty much saying, hey, this is how things are, better you learn it from me now than, find out later from somebody else who might do even worse. Like, that's even possible. I think the one scene where it kind of just shows the absurdity of the whole situation was when, remember when they're outside that supermarket, and what does he bite off her finger, or does he cut it off?
Bites it off.
He bites it off because she took off one of his fingers. So
oh no, wait a minute. I think she bit off his and then he cut off hers. I think
okay, that's right. Yeah,
yeah.
It's like it was like an eye for an eye kind of thing, or finger for finger, as it were. So so I think. So I think if anything, that I think that's the moment where Lucy finally comes to a realization. Yeah, the world is actually not as nice as it seems to be, because even when she's like in Philly, you kind of get the feeling that she still believes that everybody is good at heart, even though everybody says, yeah, Vault Dwellers are a bunch of shitheads, or whatever the effect. And even when she's wandering the wasteland, before, she kind of gets this idea that maybe nobody's that bad, but when she actually loses a body part in that instance, is like, that's when she changes. Like, that's when she comes to that realization, I think, that maybe being this happy-go-lucky, naive, maybe that's not the way to go after all.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I agree with you. And I think we see that change kind of continue, right? Because the ghoul takes Lucy to try to sell her off, right? It was pretty much at the
he's doing it for meds, because remember, they get smashed up when that weird fish monster destroys the
I think it was called like a Zolotol or something. But yeah, like he in essence is there, and he's trying to sell her off, and like you just kind of see Lucy's reaction to everything that's happening. And I think you kind of start to see more and more of that persona shift, right? And you even see it visibly as well, because she starts to kind of like, she looks more like a raider, right? I really love that transition, right? Because she's in there, and she's trying to be like sold off, and we meet was it Cogsworth, right?
Snip, yeah.
Oh, was that the name? I'm sorry, I don't even know where I got mine then, so just ignore me on that. But
I think that was the name of the actor who provided the voice.
You. Yes,
and then,
thank you. Okay,
but the robot himself is Snip. Yeah,
Snip. Thank you. But yeah, so in essence, like the robot's very upfront, like, hey, I'm gonna harvest your organs.
Yeah, but
And
not before he replaces her finger. So
I know, yeah, I did think that was weird. I guess it was maybe just to placate her a little bit, but that definitely was very odd to me. That they're gonna do that. But you kind of see how she ultimately kind of reacts to everything, and you really start to see her character harden, and you kind of see the ghoul kind of says like, "Hey, eventually you're gonna be kind of like me and be very cutthroat." And we kind of see that's how she starts to almost act, where she's a little bit more, I would say, out for herself. And even her attire changes, where she kind of starts to look more and more like a raider. Like this is the one scene where we see her outside of her blue vault jumpsuit. And I think it's, very telling from a character standpoint. Not only do we see how her personality is changing, but it's also causing this kind of physically different manifestation. I really liked how that looked. Did you notice that at all, or am I looking too much into it?
well, yeah, she's definitely going for more of this Sarah Connor, look by
Yes.
by the end, but but later on, like she kind of resumes that look. So she kind of, in a weird way, like she sort of like breaks under the pressure because she finally sees the world through Cooper's eyes. But then she kind of remembers, oh, I still believe in goodness, and so she kind of goes back,
Absolutely. Yes.
back to
Yes.
that look. So it's just like only for a very brief moment.
Absolutely. And I like that, right? Because I think it just goes to show that her character has that vulnerability to it, right? And I think that just shows it very well, where she does have this breaking point that she can only take so much shit before she kind of loses it. But then I think just because she just has this really strong personality about herself, that she just doesn't let it break her. So but yeah, I did really like that. And I think that's where we kind of see kind of her escaping the ghoul's clutches, and she's kind of out on her own after the whole sequence, where the ghoul ends up kind of like getting all the meds, and definitely much needed, getting those meds so he doesn't become feral.
But I mean, like he also has a change of heart too, in a way as well. Because because after that episode, he's still cynical and everything, but you could sort of see like there's a shift in his character. At least that's what I thought. Because
Interesting.
because remember when he's like lying there on the ground, and Lucy just walks in and gives him like the vials, and she says, "I'm never going to be anything like you," right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
But you flash forward to the end of the episode, he's like, he offers Lucy, a chance to come and join him on his quest, and you kind of get the feeling that, had he never experienced that kind of emotion, or the kind of treatment from Lucy, at that store, I don't think he would have given her a second thought, right?
Yeah.
So
No, that's a good point.
so he sort of comes to let go of his cynicism, and begins to say, maybe I can trust people, again. Maybe not completely, but to
Yeah.
a degree.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there definitely is a little bit of warming of his heart. So yeah, and I think this is where we kind of get a little bit of a breakout for our characters, where we're all kind of going on our separate paths, and we start to see a little bit more of Max and Thaddeus' relationship, and we start to see them like they're really starting to become friends, right? And I think what kind of gets really what was very bizarre to me was, Max kind of has this revelation that, hey, I'm going to stop pretending to be Knight Titus, and I'm going to kind of reveal myself to Thaddeus.
Like, why would you do that, dude? Come
Yes,
on.
like it was very. I got it, but then when you see what happens, it's almost like, damn, like it just goes to show, like when you think he's starting to get a little bit vulnerable and starting to feel okay, we kind of see this change where Thaddeus realizes that, oh, like you're just Max, like I don't like you. And then all of a sudden, like before, they were working really well together, right? Like they started to kind of bond to get better. We see Max brands Thaddeus. So we kind of see all that happening. And then as soon as Max tries to reveal himself, it's like, oh no, like now all of a sudden everything changes. And Thaddeus like takes out the power core, right? I think it's called power core, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It leaves him stuck in that armor.
Yeah, and leaves him stuck in the suit. By the way, terrible functionality for that suit that if you just like take out the battery, that the suit just becomes totally useless. I think I read somewhere that like I think in the games like it automatically ejects the person out of it. Not the case here. So really like Max is pretty much just screwed at this stage because he's stuck on a suit.
But to be fair, he did it to himself. If
Of
you think
course,
about
yes,
it,
yes.
yeah.
This is very much his own undoing by, maybe. And it's interesting, right? Because I think, we want Thaddeus and Max to kind of have this okay moment because they've both been mistreated. So for me, like, I was kind of surprised. I was actually kind of hoping that they would have maybe a more like, we're not so bad once we got a chance to just kind of coexist, interact with each other.
Yeah,
when
we're not so different,
kind of
you and
heading
I. Yeah.
roads. So for me, I was kind of expecting a little bit of a different reaction, but then obviously it doesn't work out. And Thaddeus leaves with the head, right? Because we got Dr. Wilzig's head is going from character to character. So now Thaddeus ends up getting the head at this stage, and he ends up, running away with the power core, but he gets injured, like his foot gets really stomped, which we'll see a little bit more later. So we see Thaddeus, kind of leaves them, and Max is kind of in this really vulnerable spot. And lo and behold, who we have show up is Lucy. And I think, this is right after she left the Ghoul. She has this mindset that, this world is kind of a shitty place. And we see her be very, like, she's very much unsure of whether or not she could trust Max. And we see this is kind of where she gets back into that kind of happy-go-lucky Lucy character because she kind of goes against like what she's kind of seen so far, and she's like, you know what, I'm gonna trust him. Let me help him out of the suit. And this is where we kind of get we kind of get Max and Lucy's kind of I guess episodes together because we see Max and Lucy kind of on their journey. They end up stumbling upon a new vault, and this is where we see Vault 4.
Well, I was gonna say, did you notice the color contrast between the two? Max is red, Lucy's blue.
Yes.
I mean, at least for me anyway, it kind of shows that at least Lucy, she's like this calm kind of person in spite of everything that's been happening to her, whereas Max, even though he kind of like comes off as like this happy-go-lucky kind of guy, you kind of get the feeling there's a lot boiling beneath the surface.
Oh yeah, there's definitely some pent-up anger with him.
Yeah, so I felt
sure.
like the color palettes that they used was kind of brilliant because it kind of shows off like what's going on in their heads, really.
Yeah, absolutely, and I totally agree with you that I think they are very, I would say, almost obvious with their kind of color coding with like their kind of personalities. So I think they kind of go to an extreme here. And, I think it's kind of cool where we get to see another vault. And obviously Lucy, extremely happy about this because she lived in Vault 33 all of her life. So she has this very, I would say, strong approach for how everything's going to be. And Max is very concerned, right? Like he very much doesn't trust the vault. And it's kind of interesting that their ideas almost turn throughout the whole time they're in Vault 4, right? Where Lucy's initially very happy, but then she starts to get more and more suspicious about everything. We start to see like some of the characters she meets, like for instance, have one eye, right? Or like I said, kind of have other appendages where they're not supposed to be there, or have like kind of these crazy eyes going on. So, you start to see her where when she sees the vault for the first time, she's super happy about it, but starts to get more and more kind of shady about everything that's going on.
I mean, it doesn't help. It doesn't help that the director, started the conversation off by saying, "Oh, and by the way, don't ever go into level 12."
Yes, yes, he very much plays a fool, and I think, kind of good to see. What's his name? Luca, help me out here with the actor's name.
Chris Parnell.
Yes, Chris Parnell. Thank you.
Good old Cyril.
Yes, Cyril. Yep. So good to see him here. And like I said, kind of has this very, um, I would say, very dumb kind of mentality here. But yeah, we kind of see, Lucy starts to get suspicious, and it's funny for Max where he's very apprehensive at first. Like once he starts to like be able to like take a shower, and he starts to get like all these amenities and everything, like he starts to really enjoy the vault life. So I kind of liked how one of them initially was happy and starts to become more and more concerned with it, where another one starts off the polar opposite, where they really don't want to be there, but slowly is coming around to that. So I really like that kind of clash with how everything happens. And we see Lucy eventually, kind of gets up and, ends up not following his directions and goes to level 12, where we see like kind of these experiments going on. And I liked how they did this, right? So I like the fact that we as an audience, or at least I did, and you can definitely have, if you have a different viewpoint, let me know. But I like how we're kind of under the impression that people are actually kind of doing the experiments with them, but it's actually not the case. Like the people that we know, they're kind of like the victims in this situation. Like the previous vault goers that were there were the ones doing all the experiments. So Lucy's thinking to herself, like, oh, you people are like messed up and you're doing all this stuff. But really, the people that are of Vault 4, they're very much the victims of all these experiments.
Yeah.
So what did you think about that? Did you like that type of reveal?
Yeah, I mean, because it just goes to show that the vaults aren't all monolithic. They're all they're all doing their own thing, and we kind of see it later on where all these execs are saying, you get this X number of vaults where you can do things your own way, and you get this X number of vaults, and you can rule society your own way. So, but what I think is really really interesting is what you find out in the reveal at the end. It's like maybe people in Vault 4 weren't doing things with the best of intentions.
Absolutely not.
I mean, because you come to find out they're like trying to do some sort of crossbreeding thing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And like the overseer saying, "Oh yeah, that's my like maternal uncle" or something like that.
Yes.
And
Yep.
it looks oddly enough like that creature that ate the head or
Yes.
in earlier episodes.
Yep. And I think that legitimately was the origin of it. So kind of interesting that we kind of saw what I believe to be really the origin of that creature. But yeah, and I liked how, ultimately, we get to the point where Lucy's gonna be killed, and obviously in some good old Fallout humor, right, is gonna be killed by going to the surface. So we're expecting her to be kind of executed, but she's actually just kind of more banished to the surface, but also given 2 weeks of supplies. So really nice for the people that are quote unquote doing the murdering. Really just sent to the surface, which she's been at for quite some time now, and also leaves supplies. So that was nice of them. And I like how, for Max, he kind of takes like the power core to the place, right? So he takes the power core that Vault 4 was using. And, I like how Lucy, being kind of our, I would say, emotionally strong character, right? Like she's kind of the, doing the righteous or the right thing all the time. She kind of convinces Max, like, hey, it's only right for you to give it back to them. So, I think just furthers kind of Lucy's type of mentality, right? Where she is, kind of always out there looking for the greater good. Even though that she's kind of, dealt with all this stuff, that she's, very much still a part of her character. The wasteland never really breaks her. And I like that. Like there's definitely moments where she starts to maybe teeter on it. But I think for the most part, she doesn't ever kind of waver in her resolve to kind of be the, I guess, the example that she wants to be the wasteland to be.
So let me ask you, what did you think about that scene where Max, he like puts on his, power suit and he basically goes ape shit on everybody, thinking they're gonna kill Lucy? Because I thought that was a pretty interesting moment. I thought I did laugh at that.
Yes, I did get a good laugh at that too. And I think just goes to show you, right? It's just about misreading the situation, right? So how Lucy misread all the experiments is like people on Vault 4 doing all this nasty shit to the people when it wasn't like that. Max has that same type of reaction where, he's like, oh, they're going to be killing her, and then ends up just murdering a whole bunch of people, but really they were letting her go in essence. So yes, I think it's kind of interesting how both of them have this very much kind of similar reactions where they're judging a situation by something it is, just to find out later that it was nothing like what they were thinking was going to be.
But the thing that was really, really disturbing was when Lucy, before she goes to level 12, she goes to that community meeting, and it turns out they're all worshiping Moldaver.
Yes.
Like what the hell is that all about?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think, and we'll get to Moldaver at the very end, so this way we save her for as much as we can, because
But don't you think that's kind of weird? Because
yes, for sure. Yes,
it's like
it was very.
It's just so odd that everybody's just like, worshiping her, and all the other Vault members like, oh yeah, it's a surface thing, But you have to, but like the overseer said, you kind of have to be nice if you want to win the votes to be overseer for next year,
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And I think it is just very interesting how all that works. Because like we see that there's obviously for Moldaver, she has a lot of pull within the greater picture, right? So she's not just kind of this raider that we see initially, like she clearly has a whole lot of other things going on for that. It is very interesting how all that happens. So I think we see, I think for, we kind of got characters all ultimately kind of converging on Moldaver, who's in, it's that place in California, the observatory, right? I forget what the name.
I think it's Observatory Park. I think that's
okay. Yeah, I want to say it's a name. I guess if you're from California, everyone probably knows what that is. That's where we kind of have everything converging, because we have
it's Griffith Park. That's
Griffith Park. Thank you. Yes, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you so much. So, so we have ultimately Lucy, and we have Lucy and Max once they leave Vault 4, end up running into Thaddeus, who in a previously had met up with someone in the credits known as the snake oil salesman, who ends up fixing his very mangled foot, which hopefully you didn't eat food right before you saw that, because that definitely made my stomach kind of hit the ground when I saw him take off his shoe for the first time, and you see how messed up his foot is. Now, how did he manage to travel that far on what's pretty much like a totally beat up foot? I don't know, but yes, he did. So we find out that the snake oil salesman did fix his foot, but there was a kind of an after effect that it would seem that Thaddeus he's now a ghoul. So kind of interesting that we learn a little bit more about kind of the world that we live in, where we don't really know how the ghouls came to be precisely, right? Like, I think there's some hints to it. But we can clearly see that ghouls can very much be man-made, as we see the snake oil salesman fix his foot, but makes him an undead ghoul. So I guess he take the good with the bad type of thing. But we see that our three characters, and that's going to be for Lucy, Max, and Thaddeus get together. Lucy ends up taking the head to Moldaver at Griffith Park, and we see Max returns with the Brotherhood of Steel, and it kind of brings the fake head with him. So just to kind of throw them off so Lucy can continue her mission. So we kind of have our characters getting into their kind of final positions for the end. And I guess this is a good time to bring up the ghoul, because the ghoul, for the most part, we learn not as much about the ghoul currently, but we learn more about kind of the origins of everything that happened. And I think this is where really Cooper, or the ghoul, shines is, he's kind of on his way to Moldaver as well. But we find out that actually he has a much deeper connection to her. So we see in the past, right, for the for Cooper, he was kind of like almost the mascot for Vault-Tec, right? And I thought that that was kind of really cool to see where, he's kind of this mascot, so he has a strong connection with Vault-Tec, and he's married to someone that's very much a higher up within the Vault-Tec world. And we see in the past, right, him as his human self, he starts to get more and more concerned with Vault-Tec, right? He starts to kind of question it as far as like what their purpose is, kind of like everything that they're doing. So we see him become more and more suspicious, and it gets to the point where, he ends up meeting Moldaver, right? And we see Moldaver from the past, right, 220 years ago. And we see her very much looking the same, right? I think maybe just a little bit older, but I mean, I think she looks pretty much the same age as she did. And we see, she kind of starts to put those seeds in his head that really Vault-Tec is more than what it seems. This kind of leads Cooper to being very suspicious of his wife. And he ends up getting a kind of like a listening device that he utilizes to overhear this conversation. And I think this is where really our experience of the world gets really thrown on its head, because we see Vault-Tec pretty much is almost wanting the world to come to an end, right? Like they're very much like in this position of like, hey, I'm okay with everything going on because I want to sell these these vaults to people. So I want all these rich people to be able to pay me money to exist here. And they seem to be like almost complacent, okay with the world ending. And I know about you, it felt very comical at that stage because I'm like, okay, like I know like corporate greed goes a long way, but damn, like you're kind of at the point where you're almost like, hey, bring on the end of the world type of motif. So I don't know. How'd you feel about kind of the revelations we thought with Vault-Tec and kind of all their, kind of, I guess, all this kind of experimental stuff that they're doing behind the scenes?
Well, there's this one scene where Cooper's meeting up with one of his actor friends at a bar, and his friend tells him that basically he asks him, "Do you know what fiduciary responsibility is?" Right, and that pretty much explains what Vault-Tec is up to, right?
Yes,
because if Vault-Tec has a responsibility to make money for its investors, they'll do anything to make sure that that they pay out, even if it includes ending the world. So. But I think the most heartbreaking scene was when Cooper hears his wife talking, and he's like, "Holy shit! Like she's just as corrupt as everybody."
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this does a great job of helping reflect kind of his state of mind, right? Because we look at the Ghoul as being this very hardened person, and we see why, right? Like his own wife was very much instrumental to the I don't want the world ending, right? Like that's pretty much she was very much a big part of that. And I do like how we get all these very interesting revelations throughout the episode, right? Because we see a young version of Hank, right? That is Lucy's father. We see a young version of him, so we see that he was a part of Vault-Tec at the beginning. And then we also see the other one that's the new overseer, right? I forget what. Do you remember what the one
Betty?
That's Betty, thank you. Right, Betty, and she's the one from Deadpool, right? I just wanted to make sure.
Leslie Uggams. Yep.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to make sure you knew that because I thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't pick up on it initially, but when I saw her again, I'm like, oh yeah, that was super obvious. But yeah, like you start to come up with these revelations that these characters that we kind of know. There's something really weird going on here. Why is Hank, in the, kind of this future state? Why is Betty like this? And kind of behind the scenes, we kind of have Lucy's brother, right? He's kind of been, kind of venturing into, Vault 32, and eventually gets to Vault 31, where we find out that, really a lot of these people were put into cryostasis. And it wasn't until they kind of got broken out of cryostasis that they're kind of here. So now we kind of understand why some of this timeline is kind of jarring at the beginning, But we find out like, oh, hey, actually, this is, kind of what's been going on, that some of these people work for Vault-Tec. They were put in stasis, and they come out of stasis. How and when they do it is not really explained. But they're coming out of stasis to kind of help out with kind of running the show there. And I just think that was just so interesting, that reveal of how all these characters are kind of more interconnected than we initially thought, and how that all happened. So how did you like kind of finding out how they kind of like divulge more and more information about kind of Vault-Tec and kind of their underhandedness?
I mean, it's just kind of jarring because you come to find out that all of the overseers came from the same vault, right?
Yes.
What I really liked was when Betty won the election, right? And everybody's celebrating. Norm goes, he goes into Betty's office and he types in that message to see what's really going on, and he gets that response back, right?
From a brain.
A brain in a jar, by the way.
Yes.
It was on a was it on a race car or a roto thingy or whatever it was?
Like that, yes.
But it's just so bizarre to think that all of these overseers all came from the same place, right?
Yes.
And what I thought was, it was pretty cool, and you didn't mention this before, is the fact that you've got Chet and Norm doing this sort of like buddy cop thing where they're just exploring, Vault 32 to see what's going on. And you kind of wonder, man, I really hope that they do more with it. But when they decide to select certain people from Vault 33 to go repopulate Vault 32, Chet goes with them, and it's so funny because he starts out being in love with Lucy, but through certain circumstances, he ends up being like, I guess, the new husband and father for Steph and her her child. Yes. So it's like he's sort of resigned himself, and he's like, you know what, I'm good. I'm just gonna go ahead and go on with my new life. But like I said, I mean, just to go back to the reveal, I mean, to find out that everybody came from Vault 31, it just adds more mystery, to another layer of mystery to the story. But but it also just goes to show just how deep Vault-Tec is in when it comes to bringing about the end of the world.
Yeah.
Because like they said in that meeting, what's the one enemy? It's time, right?
Yep.
And all we got to do is just we don't need to we don't need to like beat them or anything. We just need to outlive them. And what better way to do it than to accelerate the end of time than to cause a nuclear fallout?
Yep. Now, did you, and I don't know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if they ever explicitly say how everything transpired. So I don't want to say that Vault-Tec were the ones that ultimately were responsible for the bombs happening, but they definitely had no problem with them going off.
I think they hinted that they were frustrating the negotiation talks.
Yes.
Because remember they were talking about how the negotiations weren't going well. I think they weren't going well for them, so they had to do something to kind of make sure that they kind of stalled or something.
No, that's good to know, because I wasn't too sure exactly how big of a role they were with that. Obviously, best case scenario for, I guess, depending on how you're looking at it, they were totally just okay with anything that happened. Worst case scenario, they were in essence the ones that were pushing the button, so to speak, for everything to happen. So,
well, I'm thinking what they did was they may not necessarily have been the ones who pushed it, but they sort of encouraged and guided people to do that.
Yes. Yeah, they absolutely. It was kind of like you watch something terrible happening, and you just kind of take a look to the side and be like, well, not my problem. So, but yeah, and then. So I think, we have kind of all these, kind of elements happening. And then we kind of get our penultimate episode, right? Our finale here with episode 8, where everything kind of comes together, right? And we start to learn a little bit more about it. And I think this is where Moldaver, she really kind of steals the show for me, because I think for the most part, like, we're looking at this character, we've always kind of looked at her as being the villain of the show, right? That's how she was kind of initially introduced. But as we start to learn more and more about it, it's kind of like she's actually the good guy. And like, we've been kind of following not necessarily the villains, but we haven't been following the right people. Because really for her, like Moldaver, so we find out that she created this free cold fusion energy, right? And that because she was, kind of this, scientist that was looking at this stuff, that Vault-Tec, in essence, like pretty much bought out her company or what she was working with, and pretty much like just put all of her research, pretty much stopped all of it. So she wasn't able to take the cold fusion knowledge that she had out there. And we see that Hank, who she kidnapped, right? He was a part of Vault-Tec. So, the guy that, Lucy's been tracking down, her father, who we think is this kind of like a good guy, he very much was working for the enemy, so to speak. There's also we learned more about what happened to Lucy's, mom, who, she had kind of left the vault, right? And kind of was, living on the surface. And Hank had ended up coming to like get the kids and get them back, and in essence was okay with murdering her, right? And you kind of get the vibe for Moldaver. Like, did you get a vibe that they had a very strong relationship, Moldaver and Lucy's mom? I forget her name. But did you get like they had a really strong relationship, if you're catching my drift?
I mean, at the end, they're sharing that final I guess seat together. So
yes. Yep. So yeah, I think that's kind of what they're hinting at. But yeah, we have like, she's very much Moldaver for the most part has been kind of our hero, right? And I love how everything kind of turns on your head at that stage. Obviously, there's been a lot of hints to it prior to this, but this is kind of that moment where it's like, oh wow, like she's just trying to, give people power back. And I think that was such a good scene that once she gets access to the cold fusion that was in, Dr. Wilzig's head this whole time. I like how she, kind of plugs it in. And I love that scene where you see kind of the city in the background all starts to light up. Now, granted, I would have severe questions over how any type of like power, like electrical structure could exist that long. Like, I don't want to get into all that because I feel like that's a little bit too over the top. But I think that was just such a powerful scene to see that. And, you kind of have this moment where, you have the ghouls showing up to the scene. You have Max with the Brotherhood that's attacking them all. And you have Lucy there, and you kind of see how all these characters are coming to the conclusion that, holy crap, am I the bad guy? And I think they all have that moment, right? Because Lucy's been trying to, go after Moldaver to get her father, but the father was very much a bad guy in this. And you see Max, I think he has that very real realization. Moldaver has kind of that nice line where she's like, well, if the Brotherhood of Steel gets this, what do you think they're going to do with it? And I think Max knows the answer to that. And that's that the Brotherhood of Steel, they're going to use it for their own means, right? So here you have the Brotherhood of Steel that's, trying to come in here and get this. They're doing it for their own nefarious reasons. And you see like the ghoul, like he's very much, interested in Hank and all this. So he doesn't care so much about, everything that's going on at the cold fusion, but he's very much a part of this because he thinks that Hank has information about his family, right? Like what happened with his wife, what happened with his daughter, and what's going on there. And I love that kind of how everything unraveled in that last episode. I thought it was really well done. It definitely was maybe a little bit too fast. I thought it kind of went rather quickly through everything, but I just loved all the realizations that happened. So
you think they took all these? You think they took all these events and kind of compressed it?
Yeah, for sure. Episode? Yes, okay. Yeah. There definitely was. They definitely took some creative liberties with moving people around when they needed to, like having Lucy just randomly stumbling upon Max, having all the characters kind of meet in Philly at the same time. They definitely put the fast forward button to just kind of make things work, for sure. But yeah, how did you feel about kind of the final episode here when we kind of see everything happening?
really like that battle scene between the Brotherhood of Steel and the NCR
Yes.
when they attacked Griffith Park. I was like, you know what? It's very much like a Call of Duty scene right there, especially when you have all those little ships like approaching the park. I'm like,
Hmm.
I think it reminded me of which one was it? I think Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. That's what it made me think of for some reason. um, and, and just the way they were going at it, it was like again, it's over the top, but you know what? It's appropriate because it's it's based on a video game, and video game violence is over the top.
Yes.
Um, I just thought the realization that that ghoul that's just sitting at the table is Lucy's mom at the end.
Yes.
Like man, that hit me right there. I'm like, holy crap! Like because on the one hand, you know that you kind of get the feeling that is the mother, but at the
Yes.
same time, when it's finally revealed, it's like, whoa! Like,
Yes. Yes.
let
And
me catch my breath.
yeah, and imagine from Lucy's perspective, right? Like, I mean, she's been doing all this for a father who you find out is one of the biggest piece of shits out there, right? Like
Yeah, because he's the one who killed her.
yeah, yeah,
Or tried
exactly,
to
right?
kill
He's
her.
the one that did all this in his own like obsession. So I think that as I said, I really liked how everything gets kind of turned on its head at the end, right? Like everything that we kind of going for, where Moldaver's always been looked at as kind of the bad guy. She's doing all this stuff, but really she's probably the best person that's we see in the show right now, right? As far as like her kind of ideology goes, like she was just trying to make the world better, right? And I think this is where I guess we start to really think about all these different factions and what they do. And I think to kind of close out everything, I think this is what I like the most about kind of the Fallout series is there's just so many different factions, and they all have this type of idea of what it's going to take to kind of save the world. And I love how everyone has this different approach to it, and it constantly clashes. So, who's right and who's wrong? Who's to say? We never really know, right? Is Moldaver, yeah, so she created this cold fusion and she's, doing what she can. Is that ultimately going to be, is that the start for everything being better? But then you have the Brotherhood of Steel coming in, and what are they doing with everything? Like, what is their plan for cold fusion? Is it just to kind of create more weapons? Is it going to be how they kind of constantly do some of that stuff? And I just, like I said, I just found that to be such an interesting thing. Is like we just see all these characters, the NCR, like you mentioned. Haven't talked about them a lot. Then we have the Enclave, right? So we have all these different entities that exist within this Fallout world, and I'm just so interested to learn more about the universe. And I think that the first season does a good job of kind of dropping you in, getting to know some of the stuff.
Mhm.
But I'm absolutely looking forward to the future seasons here and what they do to kind of expand within the world. And I think at the end, we see an image of we see Hank looking at Las Vegas, right?
Mhm.
So clearly a hint there that we're going to be going to Vegas in the near future, just like Fallout Vegas. Definitely looking forward to that. So,
You
so
know,
yeah, what are some of your thoughts about the series as a
yeah,
whole?
I'll tell you what, I'm really excited about that hint with Fallout Vegas because guess who appears in Fallout Vegas? Kaisar's Legion. That
Mhm.
because in the franchise, Kaisar's Legion is the sort of fanatical cult like group that's operating out of the Southwest, and they're very much based on Roman culture, right? So I'm hoping at least they make an appearance in season 2 and they go up against the Brotherhood of Steel, because then you would have these two fanatical organizations, each who very certain in their ideology of how the world should be.
Yep,
Um, so I
I have that
I would love to,
military prowess to back it up, right?
exactly. So I would love to see how these two these militaristic societies kind of go at it in the next season. Um, I will say I will say this, like I'm not really much of a fan of of series based on video games, just because I had high expectations for Halo and I was burned by it. But I think what they did here was brilliantly executed, right? Because they didn't they they took the parts that were familiar, but they also added parts to make it their own. Like I said before, so they're not really following any one particular game of the franchise. They're just taking bits and pieces and kind of creating their own, as it were. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think the problem that you have is, some showrunners and writers and execs, they feel this need to be, to sort of follow, whatever the established storyline is down to, to the letter. And it creates a huge opening, because then it leaves you susceptible to, to making it as faithfully as possible, or trying to make it your own, and in the end neither party's satisfied.
Yes.
So I think with what they did here was they adapted it, but they weren't trying to say, oh, it's based on the first Fallout game, or it's based on Fallout 4 or anything like that. It's its own thing. It can stand on its own 2 feet, and it does a phenomenal job with the characters that that it has. Now, in terms of the characters in the show, obviously there are a few that we have take issue with, and we've already mentioned that. But for the most part, the main characters pretty much shine, and show that this is a franchise that has the potential to go on for many, many years, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That being said, I mean, there are elements of the series where I feel like they could have just either glossed over or omitted, but but it's just one of those things where, if they feel that it's important to the story, then more power to them.
Yes, yes, and I think just because it's the first season, I think typically it gets away with more of that stuff, because we don't know ultimately what story is they're wanting to tell, right? Like, where do they want to put the focus for everything? I just enjoy like all the different factions, and kind of seeing these ideologies clash, as like we've gotten to a world where so many people have their own mindset over what to do for kind of reestablish the society, and ultimately all they're fighting is just kind of delaying the inevitable of like, okay, like probably one or more of these people probably already had a good idea that if you just let them do their own thing, we probably would have been able to restart a little bit quicker, but we're still struggling with that. So I definitely enjoy the world. And I think something you mentioned that I guess I'll bring up right now, right here at the end, is like a lot of the side characters, like you mentioned Shet, and Lucy's brother, Norm. So like these characters, like they do such a good job. So, I know we focus a lot on, Max, Lucy, and the Ghoul, or Cooper, but there is a lot of these side characters that do such a good job, and I think it'll be very interesting what happens in the future, right? What happens with Norm now that he's in Vault 31, and he's come to find out everything that's going on. How does Shet and the other people that moved to Vault 32 doing? What's Thaddeus going to do now that he's a ghoul? Like there's just kind of like all these like interesting plot threads that they could definitely use in future seasons. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. So
I bet. Well, I was gonna say, I think that definitely, like, the definite storyline we're gonna see in season 2 is Cooper and Lucy going after Hank. Like,
yes, definitely.
I mean that's true. I mean, there's no doubt, unless something changes. I think that's going to be the the running storyline of season 2.
Absolutely, and I think we'll see how Max gets incorporated with that, because he's going to be bringing the Brotherhood of Steel along, and kind of their clash, like you said earlier, with the other faction that's in Vegas. So I definitely think that we're going to see how all these characters, they'll definitely be intermingling more in the future for sure. So,
but I mean, that's why we like the Fallout universe, is because
yes,
it's so big and expansive. I mean, there are just so many possibilities to it.
absolutely, plenty of things that they could do there. So, yeah. So, I guess for me, I guess I'll go ahead and give my final grade for this. So, I really, really enjoy this. I think it was a great show. Really liked the humor in it. I like the characters, especially both Lucy and the Ghoul's character. I think they were real standouts for me. And I think a lot of the side characters were also really strong, right? So I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed just the production value that went into this. All super strong. Like I have to admit that like I think they did such a good job with just creating everything. It feels very much lived in. And like you pointed out, it's not like heavily reliant on CGI. They absolutely did a good job with that. Just the humor, right? It's just kind of it just has its own kind of quirky way around it. So I think they did a great job. I'm very interested in it. I would say just one thing that, depending on how much you look into it, some of the like kind of the coincidences, how everyone kind of runs into each other, I can imagine be kind of jarring. So there definitely were times where I was just like, oh geez, like that was very convenient. Like when Max loses like when Max has the power suit and like a bunch of people trying to steal the suit, like he's able to beat them up even though there's four of them, and he kind of magically gets into the suit. Or for Lucy, she loses a finger and then gets it back really quick. So there's kind of like some things like that if you really kind of look at it, it could be a little bit like, okay, that was kind of weird, but I don't think that overall took me too much out of it. So I think I would give this honestly a solid, I'm going to say 4.3 out of 5. The ghouls. So 4.3 out of 5 ghouls for me. I think they did a good job with this, and I think it was a great adaptation. So hopefully other people enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, this is one of my favorite shows, to say the least. I mean, what I really enjoy about it is that from a production standpoint, everything about it is just, I mean, it's just top notch. It's such a visual feast for the eye because you have all these contrast settings. You've got everything from the Brotherhood of Steel base to the armor, the airships. I mean, my God, like it looks so authentic and lived in and real, and yet so fantastical. It's like, I mean, sometimes you just have to sit there and try to process it because there's just so much going on, but it's so well done. And then, like you said, the vault, the way that the vaults have been designed, it looks authentic. It looks, I mean, it looks amazing. And then the wasteland, and then the wasteland itself, even though it looks like there's nothing going on, it's just so expansive. You could see so much potential, and it's just populated by all these different groups and different factions. I mean, apart from the NCR and all these other weird individuals, I think there's do you remember that one scene where the ghoul gets arrested by the government?
Yes.
And it was just no friend of ours. I'm like, because I remember watching, like, holy crap, like these guys are operating out of the wasteland. Okay. I mean, hey, it's a free-for-all basically. So that's what I enjoy, is like, even in places that you think shouldn't have anybody in there are people there. Right.
Yes.
So I would give it a 4.5 out of 5 ghouls, just because the visual experience is amazing. The storyline is well written. The characters are brilliant. I mean, I kind of wish they could have done more with Maximus, because I feel like he probably had the most potential, because being the runt of the litter, you kind of figured there's so much more he could prove. But I feel like in terms of proving himself, it came more through trickery really than actual valor, right?
Yes.
Because technically he didn't earn the armor, he just took it off a dead guy.
Yeah.
Really.
And technically he got all the praise for killing Moldaver when he really didn't. So like I said, I like the adage for him. He absolutely failed up throughout the whole show.
Well, what I thought was funny was the fact that even though Lucy was willing to be honest with him, he still chose to lie to her, right? So he could have told her, yeah, my name is Max, but no, he just said, yeah, my name is Titus. Just call me Titus. And he didn't come clean probably until the very end, But I think in terms of future seasons, I think there's a lot of potential there. Absolutely. Like, they could go in any direction. Hell, season. I mean, I know I said it before, but even if they decide to devote season 2 to something else, I wouldn't be mad at all.
Yeah,
because it's because they're just so many different rabbit holes that you can go down, and you wouldn't be disappointed in any of them, right?
Absolutely, and that would be very on par, right, for the world, right? Like, you get
side quests,
somewhere, you get side quests for something else. So
yeah. Now I will say this: you contrast it with another Amazon series, right? The Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. I think, I think right now you've got two examples of how to adapt existing work very well, right? Because, like I said, because
Ring of
hold on. Let me continue with this thought.
Okay.
So and I'm being ironic in one of those examples. So
Okay.
so obviously with Fallout, you have you're taking in existing material, and but you're adapting it in such a way that it's able to, like I said before, it's able to stand on its own 2 feet. It's a unique product, but yet it's recognizable as part of this universe, right? And now in terms of the Rings of Power, you're taking something that's already existing, but instead of trying to be faithful to the material, you're just taking it in a whole nother direction to the point where it's no longer recognizable, right?
Yes.
And then you're just asking yourself, well, wouldn't it be easier to just create something completely different altogether rather than just slapping a recognized name onto it?
Yes, absolutely.
And I think those two contrast each other very well, and it's very bizarre that these two can exist in the same the same platform, right?
Yeah.
Because one is doing such a phenomenal job in knocking it out of the park, and we know it's going to get a second season, and the other, you're just scratching your head and you're asking yourself, how the hell is it getting a second season?
Yeah, and then think about how much more money is spent on the Rings of Power compared to.
Oh my god, they pumped so much money into it, so there's this expectation that it should be as good, but but you come out of it and you're like, I have no idea of what the story is about. The only reason why what the story is about is because it's in the name, right? Or I suppose with Fallout, like you pretty much know what's going on from beginning to end. Yes, there are like side stories that keep popping up, but overall you know what plot A is, right?
Yes.
But with the Rings of Power, it's pretty much like I could sort of guess what's going on, but I don't want to say it because I might be wrong. So that's my 2 cents on the whole thing.
Yeah.
Just because season 2 of Rings of Power is supposed to premiere in September.
Yes.
So
yep.
That should be a barrel of laughs right there.
Yes.
But yeah, that's going to do it for our review of season 1 of Fallout. Let us know down in the comments below what you think, if you agree with us, and if you're looking forward to season 2 as we are. And also let us know which factions you're a fan of. Remember, there are no wrong answers here. But if you say Brotherhood of Steel, you'll get a thumbs up. But that's going to do it for our review, and thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.